I was invisible in the jungle. And I walked around and I can remember I was stepping over this log and I looked down and literally like maybe 3 feet in front of me is this guy. They had set up an ambush on this trail, but this guy was right there and I could see he was eating and he even heard me. And I remember he turned around and he looked right at me, but he couldn't see me. And I remember looking at him and then I started seeing guys were coming in focus all the way down. And I started just really quietly pulling back. But you just you just became, I remember thinking like at one time I just became part of the jungle. This is one of my first missions and I'm carrying a radio, so that's heavy, because you carry the Pick 25 plus battery, so it's heavy and your ammo and your water and all that stuff. And I'm going along and I step over this kind of log thing and I started slipping down. It was like, whoosh, and I went like on my back and I'm sliding down and I realized I'm on a dead guy. I'm on Viet Cong that had been killed there maybe a month before or something. So I had all of him on me, and it was the second day of a 5-day mission. So I had him in my cleats of my boots. I had him on my pants. I'd sit down to eat and I could smell him, that smell of death. It's like the worst thing you've ever heard is when there's somebody dies in the house and they can't even go in because I had him all over me for days. And so that was sickening.
All right, so you fall down, you fall on the decomposing body of a killed enemy, and now you've got all of this all over you, and you've got a few days in the field to go. So what do you do with this psychologically? Do you just put it out of your
Make
mind?
a joke. You make a joke
Impossible.
of it. Everybody was
Start
joking.
over.
They were
Yeah.
laughing about it, like don't get next to Chambers unless it's like it was, because we'd still would huddle up at night and eat, and be in close so we could whisper, but we just make a joke of it. And back in the rear, I made light of everything. And some guys it pissed them off where they get really mad at me, but it was how I kept my sanity as I joked. They brought us into a talk and I'm sitting in the front row in one of those folding chairs, and there's, behind us is the our helicopter pilots, and then the other officers and all that, and then our team. I mean, our the leaders of our team, and this captain is from an S1 has got a big map, and he's going, well, there's 8,000 of the 5th NVA Regiment here. And there's like 4,000, and there was a sapper platoon, and and it was like 8,000 of these enemy, and we're going to put you in right here. So I raised my hand, and everyone was like, "What?" Because you don't raise your hand when you're getting this briefing. And I said, "Sir," he goes, "Yeah, Sergeant Chambers, what?" And I said, "Should we even bring any food?" And everybody goes, "Chambers, shut the fuck up!" And they were throwing stuff at me because I just thought, well, we ain't gonna last but one day, so why haul a bunch of extra stuff? Just bring a few more magazines. It was just me. I just tried to make a joke of it, and it would piss people off.
But that was your way of dealing with the situation.
Of the craziness, of the chaos, of
Yeah.
because once you got off the helicopter, it was chaos. You didn't know what was going to happen.
So the reason I asked about that story is that you tell another story, and um, again, I forget all the details, but you come across another soldier, and then you see that he has a necklace basically with a dried ear on it.
Mhm.
And I don't know, and but I'm guessing that if we went back 3 years in time and asked that guy, how would you like to go to another country and then have a necklace with someone's dried ear hanging off it? My
Well,
guess is
that's
he'd probably say, that's not something I'd be interested in doing. And so the
well,
question is, and let's assume that this is a normal guy, that in the world, he would just be, a neighbor that you could basically count on. Not a saint, but, a normal human. And perhaps he wasn't, but let's just assume for the sake of conversation. And in the world of war, something happens so that in that context, it makes sense to make a necklace with someone's ear hanging off it.
That,
And I'm wondering is, do you think, the many things you experienced, and you just mentioned one, falling onto the decomposing body of an enemy. As you look back on that, can you can understand like what would happen to a person psychologically so that in that context it makes sense to wear an ear
yeah,
hanging off a necklace?
it was a setup from the very beginning. Now, when I was there, when I got there in 68, they made it an Article 15 to cut ears off. But before 1968, that was a common practice. And our good friend Robert McNamara wanted body count. Well, how do you, and lots of times they didn't believe you if you said, well, I shot five guys. So they cut 5 ears off and bring them back. So it was a way of count. And so and since they were just, um, not really human. They were just these gooks. So cutting their ears off, big deal. Main thing back then was body count. And here's how body count worked. I shoot one guy. So I got one body count. Well, because I shot one, I probably actually shot maybe there's another, in the thing I wounded and they died later. So that's three. So I got three. So the helicopter got pilots, then they claim three. So now there's six. And the guys back at the battalion. But anyway, by the time it gets back to the Pentagon, it's like 16.
What was your own reaction when is that something you just saw and it just kind of bounced off you? Did
What
you
do you
pause
mean?
for a second
Ears?
when you saw yeah.
No, I grew up. My friend that I went to, I don't want to say his name, but I went to all the way through high school, and he went to Vietnam early on, and one of his buddies brought him back an ear, a special forces guy that was actually taught at reconnaissance school, brought him back an ear, and we used to have this ear on our mantle, in back in 66 and 67 or 67, and that was common, that they did that because you weren't. See, the Army's really, they're brilliant. If I can turn somebody into an, a non-human, I can kill them. If they're a human being with a family and a beautiful wife and four little children, it's gonna be a little harder for me to shoot that guy.
Well, so then let's go back to the story you described of when you walk right up on that guy. You're just a few feet away. He looks, doesn't see you because you're so well camouflaged. You're looking right into his face. I mean, you're not thinking about it. It's, there's nothing conscious going on. But what did you see?
I saw a human being. I mean, by then I was really starting to get it. There was an early ambush that I'd had in one of my um, the earlier missions, and it was it was an ambush, and my claymore had blown these two guys down, and there was three that went into this bomb crater, and um, so I had to search the guy that was closest to me, and Burford went to check the other guy, and so I'm over the top of him, and he's not dead. People don't die like they just, like in the movies, And he reached up and he grabbed a hold of my arm, which freaked me out, because I'm going through his pockets trying to check for intel. And I still have the bloody paper that I found on him, and I'm going through his stuff. And I push his hand away and he does it again. And I thought, I just let him hold on to my arm. Well, and I was right. I mean, this close to him. And at the moment of his death, I felt something like hit me in the chest. I swear to God. And it just shocked me because I knew when he died, I could feel his hand went loose and his eyes rolled back and boom, something hit me. And I remember talking to, I would joke about it afterwards with people because I didn't want people to think I was crazy. But then later on, I told that story to one of my guides up in Hanoi that was taking me around, and he goes, "Oh yeah, we believe that when you harm somebody, their soul attaches to yours." And it was just like that person became a human being. And I still fret about that guy. I mean, I still see that guy more than anything. And any other of the dead, I see him in my mind. And it was almost like a religious experience. Matter of fact, I went to the chaplain. We had chaplains, Camp Eagle. And I remember asking this chaplain, like, because I was like, when I first got there, I didn't cuss, I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, and I believed in God, and I, said my prayers at night and did all of that. And I said, "Am I going to go to hell?" Because just one of the, favorite sins is thou shalt not kill. And he goes, "Well, in war, it's not killing, it's murder. It's a much different, it's not murder, but he says it's a different form of killing." And he's trying to, it was like some bullshit rap that he would give to people, which I didn't buy. And I just thought, I just killed another human being. Am I going to go to hell? I mean, if you believe in that whole that story, so I didn't get, the answers that I wanted to get, but that stayed with me on till, later and later on. So they became human beings to me.
You can't know the answer to this question, but you're describing this guy who's obviously mortally wounded, and you're saying he's grabbing your arm. What is your interpretation of that? Was that just a reflex? Was in some
Yeah.
sense it was just a reflex, or was he in some
Well,
sense trying to connect person to person, or
no,
what's
I think
your
it's
interpretation
because
of that?
I'd shot him in the forehead, so I knew he was going to die. I
Yeah.
mean, there's the wound and the whole back of his head's blown. So I knew he's dying, and it was a reflex. But I don't know why, but I let him hold on to my my I guess it was my forearm, and it was like we'd had this little bond, and I still see him, in my mind. And I did, well, I used to have dreams about that.